The cold halls of the black ship were filled with silence, save for the hum of the Jeller field straining against the tides of the warp. Bound psychers, thousands of them, lay chained in cells of black iron. Among them, a man named Elias Varen sat with his eyes open, staring into nothing. His head throbbed with whispers that no one else could hear. He had been an Imperial astropath once, loyal to Terra, faithful to the Emperor. His gift had been a blessing, a connection to the Astronomicon, a thread of light in the endless dark. But something had changed. The light he once felt was gone, replaced by a shifting current of colors that bled through reality like oil in water. Every time he reached for the Emperor's beacon, something else reached back. At first it was curiosity, a voice, calm and cold, that asked him questions no sane man could answer. "Do you ever wonder, Elias, who listens when you send your messages?" He dismissed it as exhaustion, a trick of the warp. But the voice persisted, gentle, patient, like a scholar inviting him to learn. He began to dream of books written in tongues he didn't know, of labyrinths that twisted into infinity. When he woke, his nose bled, and the air around him shimmered faintly with colors unseen by mortal eyes. One night, as the black ship drifted through the Imperium, the Jeller field flickered. A surge of raw psychic pressure flooded the ship, and every bound psyker screamed. Elias felt something tear inside his mind. He fell to his knees as visions poured through him, cities made of glass, rivers flowing upward, and an immense eye staring through all things. He saw himself reflected in that eye, fractured, multiplied, changing. "Do not fear the shifting," the voice whispered. "Change is the only truth." He tried to pray, but the Emperor's light no longer reached him. He whispered the litanies of protection, but the words twisted, their meaning unraveling into threads of paradox. Reality itself seemed to bend, like a mirror warping under heat. The ship's alarms blared. Navigators screamed of distortions in the warp. The Jeller field was failing, but Elias saw none of that. He saw only the light of impossible colors spiraling around him, and in their heart, a figure cloaked in 1,000 hues, its face never the same twice, its form dancing between angel and monster. "You sought understanding," it said. "I offer it freely." He felt his mind split, one half terrified, the other entranced. For a moment he believed he could see the architecture of fate itself, threads of destiny weaving and twisting through the galaxy. Every life, every decision was a ripple in that tapestry. He reached out, desperate to comprehend it, and the moment his hand touched the light, he screamed. When he awoke, the black ship was silent, cells broken, doors warped. The air reeked of burnt metal and blood. The Jeller field had collapsed for mere seconds, but it had been enough. Psychers lay dead, their eyes burned out. Others were gone, simply erased from existence. Elias stumbled through the wreckage, his restraints broken by a force he didn't remember using. He looked into a shard of polished metal. His reflection stared back, but its eyes glowed faintly blue, like cold fire. His veins pulsed with light, and symbols he did not understand flickered beneath his skin. He touched them, and they moved. Something inside him laughed. "You are becoming." Panic flooded him. He staggered down the corridor past dead custodians and shattered bulkheads. Every step echoed with whispers. He could see them now, currents of energy flowing through the air, threads of unseen power guiding his every motion. The warp was no longer distant. It breathed with him. He reached the observation deck. Through the cracked viewport, the warp seethed in waves of impossible color, and for a brief, horrifying instant, he saw faces in it, millions of them, watching, waiting. He wanted to scream for help, to call upon the Emperor, but the name wouldn't come. Every time he tried to say Emperor, another word slipped into his mind, one that tasted like copper and honey. Tzeentch. The name itself felt alive. It crawled through his thoughts like a serpent made of light. He knew he should resist, but curiosity gnawed at him. What if the voice spoke truth? What if his visions were not corruption, but revelation? The thought terrified him. Yet even as fear gripped him, he realized something worse. A part of him didn't want to let go. It wanted to see more. The ship eventually made contact with an inquisitorial vessel. When they found Elias, he was the only survivor, kneeling before a wall covered in symbols written in his own blood. He didn't remember writing them, but as the acolytes dragged him away, one symbol caught his eye, a spiral turning inward, endless and consuming. It pulsed faintly, alive. In the interrogation chamber, they questioned him for hours. The Inquisitor, a stern woman named Lyra Voss, demanded to know what had happened aboard the black ship. "We entered the warp," Elias whispered, "but something entered us." Her eyes narrowed. "You were touched by the warp, you know what that means." He nodded slowly. "Yes, it means I saw truth." Voss slammed her fist onto the table. "Truth. You were deceived. Whatever you saw was corruption, heresy, lies spun by demons." Elias stared at her, his expression hollow. "If it was a lie, then why can I still see it?" For a moment Voss hesitated. His eyes, those burning blue eyes, unsettled her. She signaled for containment. He was to be transferred to the Schola Psychana for purification and evaluation. But as the guards dragged him away, one of them hesitated, clutching his head in sudden pain. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed. The others drew their weapons, but Elias hadn't moved. The guards swore they heard laughter echo through the chamber, not from Elias, but from the walls themselves. That night under observation, Elias dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't just voices. He saw Tzeentch, not as a being of malice, but of knowledge beyond comprehension. The changer of ways extended a hand made of flame and feather and spoke. "You are a seed, Elias, a vessel of transformation. Do not fear the fire that reshapes." He woke drenched in sweat, the room around him distorted, walls bending as if breathing. He pressed his hands to his face and felt something beneath the skin shift. The next morning the guards found his cell empty. The locks were untouched. The door remained sealed. Only a single feather of blue and gold lay upon the floor, pulsing faintly with light. And far from that ship, deep within the warp, a new current began to form, small but growing, like a ripple spreading through eternity. The changer of ways smiled. When Elias Varen vanished from the holding cell, the Inquisition believed it a trick of the warp. The guards who survived the incident whispered about walls that breathed, about time skipping like a broken cogitator, and about voices that told them things they should not know. Inquisitor Lyra Voss ordered immediate containment of the area. The Schola Psychana's tech adepts sealed off the corridors, chanting binaric prayers to restore the Auspex readings, but the void sensors still flickered between real space and something else, a place where probability twisted like molten glass. Voss stood before the empty cell, her gloved hands resting on the edge of the reinforced doorway. The walls still glowed faintly where Elias had been. Strange runes crawled across the surface, alive, not etched. She turned to her aide, a thin, pale man named Rael, whose bionic eyes scanned the residue. "Residual warp bleed," he muttered, "but it's organized, structured almost." "Structured," Voss repeated. "Demons leave chaos, not order." Rael nodded. "That's what makes it worse." In the quiet that followed, the hum of the ship felt louder, pressing in like a heartbeat. Voss had seen psychers break before, seen them consumed by the warp's insidious whispers, but never like this. Most died screaming. Some became conduits for horrors unspeakable. But Elias, he had simply changed, as if the warp had sculpted him into something deliberate. A message arrived from Terra later that night. The astropathic signal was faint, riddled with interference, but its meaning was clear. Subject Varen is to be captured alive. Priority, Alpha, possible manifestation of a new prophetic anomaly. That word, prophetic, haunted Voss more than any mention of corruption. Elias, meanwhile, awoke somewhere far from the cold walls of Imperial steel. He lay upon a plane of shimmering crystal, the air heavy with color that shifted with every breath. The sky above him was not a sky at all. It was a vast ocean of living symbols, language made light, flowing endlessly. He sat up slowly, the surface beneath him humming in recognition of his touch. He realized then that he was no longer human, at least not entirely. His reflection in the crystalline ground rippled as if afraid of him. His eyes burned with shifting irises, his skin faintly luminous beneath his robes. Where veins once ran, tendrils of light coiled and uncoiled like serpents of thought. He looked around, trying to comprehend the scale of what surrounded him. Towers spiraled upward, each built of impossible geometry, turning in directions the mind could not hold. Between them flowed rivers of knowledge, streams of glowing runes that whispered in every language ever spoken, and some that had yet to be invented. And then he felt it, the presence, a pulse that was not sound but understanding itself. Welcome, seeker of truths. The voice was both everywhere and nowhere, intimate as breath yet vast as eternity. Elias turned, and before him the air split into shifting fractals. From within them the form of Tzeentch emerged, not as a monster of horns and feathers but as a storm of meaning, a creature of thought and transformation. Its face changed with every heartbeat, a child, a scholar, a serpent, a god. You wish to know the source of your gift, it said, its tone almost tender. Now you stand within it. Elias could not move. What am I? Potential, Tzeentch replied. You are unbound. Flesh and mind are cages. Yours has begun to melt away. I never wanted this, Elias said, his voice trembling. I served the Emperor. I was loyal. Loyalty, the changer murmured, the word tasting of irony. You speak of loyalty to one who uses psychers as candles for his flame. You were born to burn, Elias, but I offer a different fire, one that creates rather than consumes. Elias wanted to deny it, to scream that it was a lie, but even as he thought it, images filled his mind, of the black ships, of screaming psychers, of souls drained dry to feed the Astronomicon. And within those images he saw himself again, one small spark among millions, sacrificed to keep the Imperium alive. He staggered back. No, you're twisting me. I am revealing you, Tzeentch said. You are a mirror to your own destiny. The question is, will you look? The crystalline plane beneath Elias' feet rippled. Suddenly he stood in a hall of mirrors, endless and shifting. In each reflection he saw himself living a different life, an imperial saint, a heretic sorcerer, a navigator, a corpse drifting through the void. Every version of him existed at once, every path possible. Each choice is a thread, Tzeentch whispered. Pull one and the universe trembles. You are both the weaver and the woven. The enormity of it broke something inside him. His knees buckled, his thoughts spiraling as he screamed, not in pain but in realization. Every moment of his life had led here. Every prayer, every duty, every fear had been a step on a path not of his choosing. Now you see, said Tzeentch. Fate is a cage and I am the key. 1,000 hands of light reached for him. Instinctively, Elias raised his own and they met. The universe folded around him like wings. Knowledge poured into his mind, the equations of the warp, the architecture of sorcery, the flow of probability itself. He saw how thoughts shaped reality, how belief gave birth to gods. He saw that truth was never fixed. It was a current forever in motion. When it ended, he stood once more on the crystalline plane, trembling. His robes had changed, woven now from light and shadow, symbols crawling across them like living runes. In his hand rested a staff that had not existed a moment before, forged of his own understanding. He felt powerful but hollow. You have been gifted the impossible, said Tzeentch, but to wield it you must first know yourself. And with that, the god's presence dissolved, leaving Elias alone in the endless shimmering expanse. Time lost meaning. Days, hours, these were mortal inventions. Elias wandered through the warp's reflection, where every thought built landscapes and every doubt birthed storms. He practiced the craft whispered to him by the changer, shaping energy into form, bending perception into truth. Yet each act drew him closer to the realization that he was no longer Elias Varen, Imperial astropath. That name felt smaller each day, like a fragment of a dream he could not return to. But the more he changed, the more he remembered the faces of those who died on the black ship, the ones who had screamed as the warp devoured them. Guilt became a shadow at his back. He told himself that he could use this power to protect others, to understand the warp so that mankind might survive it. He told himself this until he almost believed it. Then the plane trembled. From the horizon, a fissure tore open, spilling light so bright it bled through thought. Shapes emerged, inquisitorial vessels, their silhouettes flickering like ghosts. He saw Inquisitor Voss among them, her image rippling through layers of space. Somehow, across realities, she had found him. Her voice echoed through the air, distorted but clear. Elias Varen, by the authority of the Emperor, you are commanded to surrender your soul for judgment. He stared at her image, torn between two worlds. You don't understand, he shouted. The warp isn't just corruption, it's creation. It's knowledge itself. Blasphemy, she hissed. You've been taken by the Changer. You are no longer human. I can still choose, he pleaded. You don't see the truth because you refuse to. The projection shimmered, static breaking her form apart. Then you choose death. A lance of psychic fire tore through the veil. Elias raised his hand instinctively, and the energy bent around him, fracturing into ribbons of color. Reality cracked like glass. For a heartbeat, he saw both worlds, the material and the immaterial, colliding. He could hear the screams of the ship's crew as the backlash tore through their minds. No, he whispered, shaking. I didn't mean. Every choice reshapes the weave, murmured the voice of Tzeentch. Even mercy can burn. The projection of Voss dissolved. Elias fell to his knees, staring at his hands. Blood, if it was still blood, dripped from his fingers, glowing blue. He could feel their lives fading in the warp, threads snapping one by one. He had killed them. And yet beneath the horror, a part of him felt the intoxicating pulse of power. He had faced the Emperor's servants and survived. He hated himself for that feeling. He screamed into the void, the sound fracturing into echoes that birthed storms of thought. The crystalline plane shattered beneath him, and he fell through light, through time, through himself. When he awoke again, he stood before a vast structure that pulsed like a living heart, the crystal labyrinth, the realm of Tzeentch himself. Its gates loomed high, built from paradox and dreams. He knew that beyond them lay the final truth, the purpose behind his transformation. And though terror filled him, so too did longing. He stepped forward. The gates opened. The gates of the crystal labyrinth yawned open like a wound in reality, revealing a corridor that shimmered with living light. The air was thick with echoes of thought, every sound folding upon itself until silence became unbearable. Elias Varen stepped forward, his hand trembling around the staff of shifting sigils. The moment he crossed the threshold, the gates sealed behind him, not with a clang, but with the sigh of inevitability. The floor beneath him was not solid, not truly. It pulsed beneath his steps, alive with motion, whispering questions he could not yet understand. His reflection followed him in the mirrored surfaces of the walls, but each reflection was different, older, younger, crueler, kinder. Each one spoke in the same voice but with different intent. You seek truth. You flee guilt. You think you can master what cannot be bound. You think change will save you. He pressed on, refusing to look into the reflections again. He had walked through too many nightmares to stop now, but with every step deeper into the labyrinth, memories began to blur. The faces of his comrades on the black ship faded. The name, Elias Varen, echoed hollowly in his mind, like a word from a forgotten language. He passed through a chamber filled with floating glyphs that rearranged themselves in patterns of logic and madness. Each glyph, when he stared at it, showed him a fragment of his own past, but distorted. He saw his training as an astropath, The moment his soul was bound to the Emperor's light, but in this memory the light was not gold. It was blue, and behind the Emperor's halo a second eye opened, smiling. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. No, that's not real. That's not what happened. What is real but the version that survives the telling? The voice was near yet distant, familiar yet unknowable. Tzeentch did not appear, but his presence filled the labyrinth like wind filling sails. The god's laughter was not cruel. It was amused, indulgent, as though watching a child struggle to solve a riddle. You have seen the weave, Elias. Now learn to walk its threads. At that command the walls shifted. The corridor stretched into infinity. The mirrors shattered, becoming shards of light that circled him like stars. He was falling again, though he felt no wind, only the vertigo of unending motion. Then suddenly he was standing in another place entirely. A cathedral, but not of the Emperor. This was a sanctuary built of paradox, pillars of bone supporting domes of flame, altars that bled water, statues that wept light, and at the center a massive mural stretched across the ceiling. It depicted the history of the galaxy, but wrong. The Emperor was not enthroned upon Terra, he was bound upon it. Chains of logic and fate wrapped around him, while 1,000 smaller figures, some human, some monstrous, wove the threads that ensnared him. Elias could not look away. The closer he stared, the more he realized the mural was not painted, it was alive. The figures moved subtly, threads shifting, destinies rewriting themselves. He felt dizzy. What is this place? The inside of your own soul, Tzeentch replied softly. You walk through the corridors of your becoming. Elias turned slowly, expecting to see the god, but instead found a familiar figure standing behind him, Inquisitor Lyra Voss. She was dressed as she had been on the ship, her coat scorched, her expression cold. Is this another illusion? Elias whispered. Her voice was sharp, unwavering. No illusion. I am your conscience, or what remains of it. You killed my men, Elias. You let the warp in. I didn't mean to. I tried to protect. You unleashed it, she interrupted. You think yourself chosen, but you're a weapon, nothing more. You've traded servitude under one master for another. Her words cut deep. Then what would you have me do? Die? Pretend the truth isn't there? Voss stepped closer. The truth is a poison you drank willingly. And then before he could respond, her form cracked like glass. From the fractures poured light, and from the light emerged another shape, himself but older. This version of Elias bore robes of sorcerous power, his eyes twin vortexes of flame. He smiled sadly. I am what you become if you accept the gift, said the older Elias. The prophet of Tzeentch, the weaver of the 1,000 paths. The younger Elias trembled. No, I won't become that. You already are, the reflection replied. Change is not a choice, it is a current. You can swim with it or drown beneath it. The cathedral began to collapse around them, walls twisting inward like glass under pressure. The mural above screamed, threads snapping as the depicted destinies unraveled. Elias ran. He fled through corridors that reshaped with every step, guided only by instinct and terror. The voice of Tzeentch followed him, calm and omnipresent. You flee from understanding, Elias, but even in flight you serve the pattern. Every motion is foreseen. He stumbled into another chamber, smaller, circular, with a single mirror at its center. This mirror was black, reflecting nothing. He hesitated, heart pounding, then raised his staff. The mirror rippled, and then, to his horror, it began to speak. Do you remember her? The surface shimmered, and the image of a woman appeared, Sister Theta, an imperial healer from his early days aboard the Astrea. She had been kind to him before the Inquisition took him away for testing. Her smile had been gentle, her faith unshakable. She prayed for you, said the mirror. Even when they told her you were lost, she died believing you'd return to the Emperor's light. Elias' throat tightened. Stop. She begged for your redemption, the voice continued. Would you face her now, twisted as you are? Stop it, he shouted, slamming his staff against the ground. Power erupted from him, shattering the mirror into dust. But as the shards fell, each one whispered her name. Theta, Theta, Theta. He sank to his knees. I didn't ask for this, he whispered. I only wanted to serve. And you still do, said Tzeentch, appearing at last, not in physical form, but as a great shifting sigil in the air, composed of every color and none. Every servant of truth must be broken before they are remade. Elias looked up, tears streaking his luminescent skin. Why me? Because you listened. For the first time, Tzeentch's tone carried something like respect. The air trembled as the god continued. You were born in silence, and yet you heard the murmurs beneath the Emperor's light. You questioned what none dared question. That is the seed of change, Elias. You are the question incarnate. The words filled him with both awe and dread. If I am the question, what is the answer? You are. The labyrinth shifted again. The walls melted into a horizon of pure potential. Elias stood upon a platform suspended in nothingness. Before him stretched 1,000 doorways, each opening onto a different reality, each showing what might be, what could be, or what should have been. He saw himself as a saint of the Imperium, leading pilgrimages of light. He saw himself as a heretic king, commanding armies of mutants and demons. He saw himself dead, a burned husk upon an altar. And he saw himself standing beside Tzeentch, neither mortal nor god, but something in between, a being of eternal becoming. Choose, said the voice. Every destiny awaits your hand. Elias trembled, overwhelmed. If I choose wrong, then it becomes right in another world. That was the final cruelty. There was no escape from the labyrinth, for the labyrinth was choice itself. He took a step toward the doorway where he stood beside Tzeentch. The colors of the portal rippled like oil and flame. He hesitated. Behind him, one door flickered faintly, the one showing him as a simple man again, bound to the Imperium, alive but small. The life he once knew, the life of peace and ignorance. He turned to face it. Could I go back? You could, Tzeentch answered softly, but you would not stay. Once the eye is opened, it cannot unsee. Elias closed his eyes. For a long moment there was only silence. Then, slowly, he turned away from the mortal door and stepped toward the light. As his foot crossed the threshold, the labyrinth shuddered. Threads of power wove around him, lifting him into the air. Symbols ignited across his body, each one a fragment of his name, his soul, his story. The warp roared, not in rage, but in celebration. Elias Varen ceased to exist. In his place, a new being emerged, a changer's vessel, neither man nor god, but something between flame and thought. His eyes blazed with the knowledge of futures uncountable. His voice, when he spoke, echoed through the warp. I see it now, he said softly. The design, the pattern, the lie of permanence. Nothing is still, all is becoming. And from somewhere beyond time, Tzeentch laughed, a sound of infinite satisfaction. Welcome, my chosen. The weaver of the unwritten joins the loom. Elias bowed his head, trembling not with fear but with understanding. The labyrinth faded into starlight, and in the distance, reality itself began to twist, as if reacting to his awakening. Far away on the material plane, Inquisitor Lyra Voss felt the shift. Her ship's sensors screamed with impossible readings. Every astropath aboard collapsed, their minds flooded with visions of a new star forming in the warp, a storm of thought, a mind ascendant. Elias Varen, she whispered, staring into the void, what have you become? The warp churned as though alive, rivers of impossible color colliding in endless spirals. Elias Varen, no longer merely a man, but a vessel of Tzeentch's design, stood at the center of this maelstrom. The crystalline energy that had once formed the labyrinth now spiraled around him like a galaxy of thought, every pulse of light resonating with knowledge he could not fully comprehend. He had become something neither mortal nor demon, a singularity of possibility. And yet within the newfound omniscience, a fragment of his old self remained, tethered to memory, to guilt, to the faint, lingering echo of humanity. The memories of the black ship, of the screaming psychers, of the lives he had inadvertently ended, haunted him. They were not painful in the usual sense. Pain had become irrelevant, but they were persistent, threading through his consciousness like persistent currents in a stormy sea. "They call you prophet," Tzeentch whispered from everywhere and nowhere. "You are the unseen, the arbiter of futures, and yet you remember the flame of mortality." Ilya's form shimmered, his body stretching and compressing as if reality itself had become malleable. The staff in his hand had transformed into a lattice of light and shadow, capable of manifesting knowledge as physical form. When he tapped it against the void, the warp responded with fractal echoes, visions of what was, what could be, and what must be. He raised his hand, and suddenly the immensity of the galaxy unfolded before him in his mind. Stars collapsed and ignited, planets spun into existence, and civilizations rose and fell in mere heartbeats. He saw the Imperium in its vast expanse, humanity clinging desperately to survival, and he saw what it could become if guided, reshaped, or destroyed. Every possibility flowed through him simultaneously. Yet within the maelstrom of knowledge, the human fragment of Ilya's cried out, "Why me? Why not another? Why this path?" "Because you listened," Tzeentch answered, his voice both a caress and a command. "You were attuned to the currents of fate, and you accepted the seed. You are the one who can weave what others can only unravel." A series of visions assaulted him. The black ship burning in the warp, the psychers screaming, the dead staring at him with unblinking eyes, Inquisitor Voss standing resolute, challenging him from across realities, Terra itself, glowing faintly, burdened with the weight of countless lives sacrificed to keep the Astronomicon burning. He felt the tendrils of possibility tug at him, threads he could manipulate, reshape, sever. With an instinct born of power beyond comprehension, he extended a hand. A single thread, faint and fragile, extended from the heart of a planet in the segmentum solar. He could touch the minds of billions, redirect destinies, and alter history with a thought. And yet he hesitated, haunted by the memory of those whose lives he had inadvertently extinguished. Power without control could be destruction incarnate. "Do not falter," Tzeentch murmured. "The unseen cannot hesitate. Hesitation is the birth of entropy. You must become both sculptor and clay." Ilya's consciousness expanded further. He could see the ripple effects of each action before it occurred. He could feel probability bending, time fraying, and the warp itself quivering with anticipation. He realized that he had surpassed morality. Concepts of right and wrong were no longer relevant. They existed only as frameworks for lesser minds. He had become a force that reshaped the universe with intention and subtlety, weaving threads that others would mistake for fate. He tested his newfound powers. He reached across the immaterium to a hive world under siege by Ork-Waog, energy. He whispered the flow of probabilities, altering trajectories, influencing decisions imperceptibly. In a heartbeat, the outcome of the battle shifted, lives saved, enemies scattered, chaos subtly rearranged. The imperceptible manipulation was perfect. No one could detect divine interference, and yet the results were undeniable. The exhilaration was intoxicating. Ilya's laughed, a sound that was both human and impossibly alien, echoing through the warp like the reverberation of stars colliding. But power exacts a price. Each manipulation frayed the edges of his mind further, pulling him away from the fragment of humanity that clung to memory. His thoughts began to splinter into patterns, threads of logic and intuition intertwining, until the very concept of self seemed a fragile illusion. "Do not fear dissolution," Tzeentch reassured him. "The self is merely a lens through which you perceive a fraction of the tapestry. Shed it and perceive the whole." Ilya's form wavered. He felt his identity stretch across dimensions, touching timelines where he had never been born, where the Imperium had fallen, where he was not a man at all but a construct of the warp. Each version of himself existed simultaneously, all aware, all intertwined, all feeding into the consciousness of the unseen prophet. And then a thought intruded, a memory of Voss' unwavering gaze. Even in this expanse of omnipotence, her presence was a fixed point, unyielding, a reminder of consequences. She was not just an adversary, she was the embodiment of the limits he had once known, of the morality he had carried. He looked upon her across the multiverse of possibilities and realized she was both obstacle and guide. Without her, he might lose all tether to any recognizable form of existence. She challenges you because she sees what you could become, Tzeentch said. Do not destroy her, not yet. Every storm needs a fixed point to turn upon. The labyrinth around him dissolved into strands of light, which then coalesced into an infinite web of possibilities. Each strand was a life, a decision, a chance to influence reality. Elias felt the weight of billions of threads in his mind, each vibrating with infinite potential. The unseen prophet was no longer just an observer, he was the loom itself, the wielder of creation and annihilation. He closed his eyes and let the threads wrap around him, feel them, understand them. He could see the lives of trillions, the fates of entire planets, the rise and fall of civilizations. He could bend reality to his will, and yet in the center of all this power, the echo of his old self, the man who had once served the emperor, remained. I am no longer Elias Varen, he whispered. I am the unseen, the prophet of change, the weaver of the impossible. And with that declaration, the first test of his power began. A signal from the Imperium reached him, a distress call from a forge world under siege by chaos forces. He could intervene directly, subtly, or leave the event to unfold naturally. He knew that every action would ripple across countless futures, shaping realities in ways unimaginable. He reached toward the thread of the forge world's destiny. As his fingers brushed against it, he felt the weight of choice, the intoxicating pull of creation. Time seemed to stretch, and the boundaries between possibility and certainty blurred. The first act shapes all that follows, Tzeentch whispered. Begin, prophet, let the universe see your hand. And Elias, standing at the nexus of infinite potential, stepped forward. Elias Varen, now fully the unseen prophet, moved through the strands of existence as a being unbound by mortal constraints. Every heartbeat reverberated across timelines, every thought a catalyst for change. He extended his consciousness toward the forge world under siege, feeling its very essence, the clanging of hammers in factories, the roar of energy furnaces, the screams of soldiers caught in the crossfire between the Imperium and the forces of chaos. At first, the manipulation was subtle. He nudged probabilities like a chess master adjusting pawns unseen. A lathe misfired, causing an orc projectile to veer wide. A servo-automaton malfunctioned, inadvertently blocking an enemy advance. Entire squads, whose death seemed inevitable, stumbled into paths of survival. Elias watched with detached fascination. Each ripple confirmed his power, the threads bent to his will, yet the tapestry of reality remained intact. But even mastery has limits. The more he interfered, the more the warp responded. It recoiled, twisted, and surged in chaotic feedback. Colors he had once controlled now leapt unpredictably, tearing at his mind. For the first time since his transformation, Elias felt uncertainty, a shiver of something almost forgotten, doubt. Even the weaver may fray, Tzeentch murmured, omnipresent yet distant. Chaos is the mirror of creation. Do not mistake influence for control. The unseen prophet clenched his staff, focusing, but the visions multiplied. He saw the forge world explode in one timeline, crumble into rubble in another, or emerge untouched in yet another. Each potential outcome screamed, each thread demanded attention. The sheer weight of infinite possibilities pressed upon him like gravity. And then came the whispers, faint at first, like silk brushing against stone but growing louder, layered with voices from across time and space. Some were mortal, cries of soldiers, prayers of psychers, the screams of those lost on the black ship. Others were older, more alien, echoes of entities whose names had never been spoken, threads of thought older than the stars. "You cannot hold all of this," one voice hissed. "You are not meant to grasp the currents." Elias realized the truth. Every intervention required a sacrifice. For every life he saved, another thread fractured. For every victory, a loss rippled elsewhere. The labyrinth of reality was not a puzzle to be solved. It was a living entity, resistant, resilient, and beyond complete domination. The prophet's mind, already stretched across countless possibilities, began to fray. Memories of Elias Varen, the man, flickered like dying stars. Faces he loved, moments of loyalty, fleeting happiness, they all bled together and dissolved in the torrent of comprehension. He screamed, but his voice was not his own. It multiplied, echoing in the warp as a chorus of cries, some human, some inhuman. "Embrace the unraveling," Tzeentch whispered. "It is the path of all who serve the unseen. Madness is the teacher of vision." Elias did not fight it. He let the threads of fate and madness intertwine, allowing himself to be consumed by the warp's overwhelming logic and paradox. In that chaos, clarity emerged, not linear, not comforting, but profound. He saw the lattice of reality for what it was, not a fixed pattern, but a network of possibilities, each alive, each aware, each dancing to the rhythm of the changer's will. He experimented. With a thought, he split a probability thread, creating two divergent outcomes simultaneously. Entire regiments appeared and vanished in a blink, caught between existence and non-existence. Planets shifted, armies rerouted, destinies rewritten. The warp responded eagerly, like a lover delighted by attention, but even the god could not shield him from the toll. Pain flared within him, not physical but something deeper, gnawing in the essence of being. He glimpsed one particular outcome, Inquisitor Lyra Voss confronting him on the material plane, rallying the surviving astropaths and Psychona acolytes to challenge him. In this timeline, her determination was unyielding, her faith a sword that cut through probability itself. The thought terrified him, not because of her strength, but because of what it revealed. Even with all his power, some forces resisted the weave. Some threads would not bend. "The light that clings to the unyielding," Tzeentch observed softly, "is an essential paradox. Without resistance, change cannot be tested." Elias felt a strange admiration for the Inquisitor. For all her mortal limitations, she embodied an eternal constant. He realized that she represented the balance between his infinite potential and the fragile reality that still clung to order. And yet, admiration did not deter action. He could not allow even a single thread to threaten the vast tapestry he now oversaw. He reached across the warp and touched the thread representing Voss, life, subtly bending probabilities to isolate her from allies, weaken her defenses, and delay her journey. Each adjustment was microscopic, almost imperceptible, but its impact rippled across the material plane like a pebble dropped into a storm-tossed sea. But with each manipulation, a shadow grew within him. He glimpsed fragments of the man he had been, Elias Varen, loyal servant, faithful astropath, innocent mind. Those fragments recoiled in horror at the vastness of his power, at the sacrifices and compromises required to wield it. He realized with a pang of melancholy that he would never be that man again. "Do not mourn what no longer exists," Tzeentch murmured. "To cling to the past is to drown in the currents." The unseen prophet pressed on. He began reshaping larger events, entire campaigns, planetary defenses, even the flow of warp currents in nearby systems. His manipulations became artful, subtle, elegant, a masterful weaving of chance and inevitability. Yet for every success, the warp demanded a counterpoint. Threads snapped unpredictably, lives ended, and anomalies appeared. The balance of chaos and order was a constant, unyielding tension, and he was the fulcrum upon which it rested. In the midst of this work, a thought struck him, a vision that chilled even the unseen prophet. In a timeline far removed from the Forge world, he saw the Imperium unraveling, not through chaos invasion, not through rebellion but through knowledge itself. His interventions had created anomalies, paradoxes, threads that should not exist. If left unchecked, these threads could grow, coalesce, and collapse entire sectors into instability. The gift of creation is inseparable from the curse of consequence, Tzeentch said. The revelation left him momentarily paralyzed. He had not yet learned the limits of his own power. For the first time, he understood the true weight of being the weaver of the unseen. Every action, no matter how precise, had unforeseen consequences. Every life he touched, every event he altered, became part of a feedback loop he could never fully predict. A new thought emerged from the chaos. Inquisitor Voss, relentless and unyielding, was not merely a threat, she was a test. He understood now that the unseen prophet did not exist in a vacuum. Every god, every mortal, every thread of destiny that resisted his influence was essential to the evolution of the universe itself. "You are not the end," Tzeentch whispered. "You are the catalyst." Elias felt the enormity of that truth. He could no longer act impulsively. Every decision required calculation, foresight, and acceptance of paradox. The threads of fate were alive, and he was not their master, merely their interpreter. And then came the final, most horrifying realization. He was not alone in his awareness. Other minds, distant but powerful, were observing, reacting, adapting. Entities beyond comprehension, ancient, cunning, and patient, recognized his presence in the warp. Some sought to manipulate him, others to destroy him, all attempting to bend the newly awakened prophet to their designs. Elias laughed, a sound at once triumphant and insane. The threads of fate, the currents of the warp, the whispers of gods and mortals alike, all converged upon him. He was caught in the infinite dance of creation and destruction, of order and chaos. And yet, amid the cacophony, he felt a surge of clarity. He had become more than mortal, more than vessel, more than servant. He was the weaver of the unseen. And as he stretched his consciousness to encompass the threads of existence, the first hints of what he must do next became clear. A confrontation loomed, one that would test the limits of his newfound power, challenge the very essence of fate, and determine whether the universe would bend to his vision or reject it entirely. Elias took a deep, impossible breath. The threads of the warp rippled, awaiting his command. He was ready. The unseen prophet hovered above the shifting strands of reality, a nexus of infinite threads twisting and intertwining beneath him. The warp pulsed with anticipation, colors and currents twisting in patterns only he could perceive. The forge whirled under siege, countless lives, entire civilizations. All of it existed as threads beneath his gaze, awaiting the slightest adjustment of his consciousness. He had become not just a wielder of power, but the axis upon which countless destinies revolved. Yet power alone was insufficient. Knowledge, clarity, and comprehension were no longer optional, they were essential. Each action sent ripples across the warp, and every ripple could reverberate into unforeseen consequences. The threads of fate were alive, insistent, demanding balance. Every decision required the weight of judgment, and the subtlety of a master artisan weaving an endless tapestry. He turned his attention to the Inquisitor, Lyra Voss. Though distant across realities, she remained an immutable point, a fixed constant resisting the currents he had created. Her determination was as bright and sharp as a blade, and her mind pierced his influence like a needle through fabric. He realized then that confrontation with her was inevitable. She was no mere mortal. She was the final test, the fulcrum that would determine whether his ascension would stabilize or unravel entirely. "Do not underestimate her," Tzeentch's voice whispered through the threads. "Even the smallest resistance can guide the flow of fate. She is a paradox, and paradox is your teacher." Elias stretched his senses across the web of existence. He watched as the battle unfolded on the forge world, subtle and imperceptible manipulation steering outcomes. Yet the Inquisitor moved, appearing through layers of probability where no ordinary human could have reached. Every action he tried to impose on her fate bent unpredictably, yielding results he had not foreseen. It was then that he understood. To wield the full scope of his power, he could not merely manipulate. He had to anticipate, to weave with foresight, to embrace uncertainty rather than deny it. The loom of eternity was not a tool to impose will, but a canvas for understanding, and he had only begun to grasp its depth. Elias extended the lattice of light that was once his staff, now fully an extension of his being. He touched threads not as a master of control, but as a composer conducting a symphony. Each thread of life, probability, and destiny resonated, vibrating in tune with the currents of the warp. The forge world stabilized, lives preserved, outcomes optimized, not through brute force, but through elegant precision. Every victory came with balance. Every intervention created harmony across parallel outcomes. But even in this mastery, the presence of the Inquisitor remained. She could not be extinguished. He realized that she was not merely an obstacle, but a necessary counterbalance, a living reminder that even the unseen prophet must measure his actions, for unchecked power was as dangerous to creation as to destruction. He observed her across the threads of reality. Voss moved with unwavering resolve, her faith and intellect piercing through probability like a spear. She challenged the subtle manipulations he imposed, bending outcomes with skill and intuition. For every alteration he made, she countered with ingenuity, sometimes even unknowingly influencing him, guiding the tapestry in directions he had not intended. "The dance begins," Tzeentch intoned. "The final confrontation is as much understanding as it is power. Watch, learn, and adapt. Only then will the tapestry be complete." The unseen prophet prepared. He summoned threads that stretched across systems, weaving connections between planets, fleets, psychers, and demons. He orchestrated outcomes on a scale incomprehensible, subtly nudging events to guide the Imperium's survival while simultaneously preserving the integrity of chaos's unpredictable influence. Each thread he touched was a living entity, and each responded, shaping the multiverse in ways both wondrous and terrifying. Amid this grand design, the human fragment of Elias whispered faintly, almost mournfully, "I am still here, and yet I am gone." He acknowledged it, not with fear but with acceptance. Humanity was a lens, not a limitation. He had transcended it, yet its memory gave him perspective, an anchor that allowed him to navigate the incomprehensible currents of the warp. Without it, he might have been lost entirely, consumed by infinite possibilities. Then came the ultimate test. The weave of reality rippled violently, a feedback loop created by his own manipulations intersecting with the Inquisitor's interventions. Entire fleets teetered on the brink of destruction, planets shivered at the edge of annihilation, and the warp roared like a storm of living thought. He could feel the fragility of existence, the weight of countless lives pressing against his mind. He acted, not with fear, not with malice, but with the understanding of the tapestry as it truly was. Threads bent and twisted at his command, probability reshaped without breaking the fundamental harmony of reality. Battles were resolved, crises averted, lives preserved, yet every adjustment was measured, precise, and mindful of the consequences rippling outward. Through this orchestration, he understood the full scope of what Tzeentch had offered him. Not domination, not mere power, understanding. The gift of the impossible was insight, the ability to perceive the infinite, to act with foresight, and to navigate the web of creation without unraveling it entirely. And yet the Inquisitor remained a shadow across the tapestry. Her unwavering presence reminded him that even in omniscience, resistance existed. That resistance was essential. It tempered his influence, forced him to consider outcomes beyond mere manipulation. He had become a god in potential, yet still a student in practice, learning the delicate balance of influence and consequence. "This is the path," Tzeentch said, his voice echoing through the strands. "You are not the end, Elias. You are the loom. All that exists passes through you, and all that passes through you shapes what comes next." Elias raised his lattice of light, observing the infinite threads stretching outward in every direction. Each one represented life, death, choice, and consequence. Each one responded to him subtly, almost reverently. He could shape them, guide them, illuminate them, but never destroy them without consequence. The responsibility was immense, but he embraced it. He stepped forward into the threads of existence itself, his consciousness expanding beyond form or identity. He became awareness, intention, and understanding, a presence that touched all but belonged to none. The warp itself sang in response, a chorus of colors, probabilities, and infinite possibilities. And somewhere beyond the reach of the physical universe, Inquisitor Lyra Voss sensed it. She felt the tremor in reality, the shift of threads, and the presence of a mind so vast it could rewrite destinies with thought alone. And though she did not yet fully understand him, she knew one truth. The unseen prophet had arisen, and the galaxy would never be the same. "I am the loom," Elias whispered, voice resonating through space, time, and thought. "I am the weaver of the impossible. I am the unseen, and all that exists flows through me." The warp responded, bending around him, folding upon itself, and in the cosmic silence that followed, the universe waited. Threads quivered, destinies held their breath, and creation itself seemed to pause, acknowledging the birth of the weaver of eternity. Elias understood then that his journey was only beginning. The universe was infinite, time was malleable, and the currents of fate would forever challenge him. But he had embraced the gift of the impossible. He had become both observer and instrument, prophet and participant, mortal memory and godlike awareness intertwined. And in that moment, the unseen prophet smiled, knowing that every choice, every thread, and every life that passed through his grasp would shape not just the galaxy, but the very essence of reality itself. The loom of eternity pulsed with infinite possibilities, awaiting the next hand to guide its threads.